right, one of the big surprises at the Microsoft press conference today was a game called Ori and the Blind Forest by a new studio, Moon Studios, and I gotta say, it reminded me a little bit of Studio Ghibli. It got that metroidvania vibe. Can you tell us a little bit about the game, the studio, because I guess everyone's in the dark about this, as I was.
We had to keep the game secret for 4 years before we actually showed it to people today, so it's super exciting to have people playing the game, finally, seeing the game. About the studio, we've just basically, we are a virtual studio, I would say. We have people all around the world. We just basically pick the right people for the jobs, right? And just work all around the world. We have people in Australia and America and all over Europe and so on to just come together and make this game.
So the art style is very particular and the setting. Can you tell us what is the setting here? Who are you and what's this world like?
So I don't want to really talk too much about the story today, but you play Ori, who's a forest spirit, and he's on this journey for self-identification and really has to find out more about himself. It's a bit of a coming-of-age story. It's definitely inspired by Disney films, and I think you've seen it a little bit in the trailer that we released. Yeah, but I don't want to give too much away today.
Oh, well, I mean, we're going to play the story later, so we can save that for later. But what I like the approach to the metroidvania style game. I think every gamer has sort of a place in their heart. I know a lot of developers do. Is it a dream of yours to make this kind of game?
We grew up playing games like A Link to the Past, Super Metroid, and it always bugged me that we never really had games anymore where I felt the same kind of feeling as I did as a child, right, when I played these games. So that's what we wanted to recreate. The idea was, can we give people that feeling again, right? And hopefully we succeeded in that. It does definitely, when it comes to a Metroidvania, right, it's extremely difficult to design a real Metroidvania game. There's been a lot of games recently that have been fairly linear, but then slap a Metroidvania map on top of it and then call it a Metroidvania. And that's not really doing the job. We've been designing from the ground up to become one of those, one of those games where everything is connected. There's no loading time in the game ever, right? And yeah, it's been designed from the ground up to be that kind of experience.
And you got to design areas that only 1% of the players will ever find.
Absolutely.
I mean, the action, there's enemies there that you fight and so on and so forth. What do you feel is like, how important is that, and sort of how important is the exploration and unlocking stuff for you as a student?
Well, the biggest thing is, we took those core elements, right, and we tried to push the 2D gameplay forward on all levels. The platforming, we tried to make it absolutely pixel perfect, right? Obviously, we were inspired by things like Super Meat Boy, anything that pushed platforming forward and tried to improve on everything, right? But
it's a very analog feel to the jumps, like the way you push it in longer to extend the jumps. And at first it's like, oh, I can't make that jump, but then you learn a little bit more to feel the game, and it's something that happens just within minutes.
We probably spent over 1.5 years just to perfect the controls, really just perfect the controls. Again, we've been working on this thing for 4 years just to give people an absolutely polished game. And yeah, it maybe at the start it takes a little while, but after like 5 minutes you get it. You get more and more abilities through the real Metroidvania formula, right? And you just get used to it, and it hopefully, to people it controls perfectly. Big thing is for us that we actually merge all those game components together. Like platforming works together with the exploration style, and then works hand in hand with the enemies. The enemies are designed in a way where you actually have to use all your abilities to the full effect in order to actually defeat enemies and so on. And then there's also light RPG elements in the game, just to keep the player going, and yeah.
So when you talk about light RPG, are we talking about leveling up, or is it more like unlocking a skill tree, or?
So I always liked the analogy of I always liked what Konami was doing with Symphony of the Night, right? They took the Metroid formula, like that Metroidvania formula, and then added RPG elements on top, and it worked surprisingly well, right? And we really wanted to take that a step further. And there's a level up system, but then the player can also directly decide in which direction he actually want to change his play style. And that's very, very interesting. And that worked really, really well. So that's very exciting.
The one thing that jumps out at you when you see the game is obviously the art style. Can you tell us a little bit about the artists that have worked on this and sort of their vision and what's there?
It's there are two main goals. We wanted to craft a really beautiful game, but at the same time not sacrifice gameplay. So the art style is very kind of like, it's definitely inspired by things like Studio Ghibli, Miyazaki, those kind of things. At the same time, we always try to make sure that the controls are 100% perfect. So it's a beautiful game, but it's still absolutely pixel perfect. I think recently a lot of games, you know, in that genre that had great graphics, the controls, you know, they sacrificed the controls a little bit, or things started to feel a little bit floaty and so on. And we really try to make sure that the controls stay absolutely pixel perfect, just like the 8 or 16-bit games that you played in your youth, right? But games don't have to look like that anymore, and you know.
But there are little things moving all over the place, little strands. Oh, the platforms they're moving a little bit, so there is that sort of vibrant, organic feel to it as well. It's not just sort of like a.
We try to contextualize everything and create a really living, breathing world. For almost every screen in the game, we created unique art. Like there used to be this thing in like you used to create tile sets in games, right? And then just plaster them throughout the levels and so on. And that really doesn't work if you work with HD art, right? So we really had to go in and like, you know, handcraft basically for every single screen unique art. And that's been a mission, but you know, we finally succeeded on that.
So 4 years in the making. When's it coming out?
It's coming this fall for Xbox One and the PC.
Is it exclusive on Xbox, or are you looking at other platforms?
It's a Microsoft published game, exclusive on Xbox One.
That's as exclusive as it gets.
Yeah, that's exclusive as it gets, yeah.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.